Radical Love Live is a member of the Choircast Network. This is Radical Love Live, an ongoing series of conversations with thought leaders exploring faith outside the boxes. Hosted by Mark Dilcom and Kelly Wilson.
Hey, Kelly.
Hey, Mark. How are you?
I'm freaking awesome.
Well, that's so good to hear. Are you staying dry?
I am. Yeah. So I was, obviously ask you how you doing. So how are you doing? And are you staying dry?
Yes, I'm even in the basement here, but there are some flood warnings around, and Debbie is wreaking havoc somewhere in the world. So
I'm looking out my window right now. I see trees going. Arr!
yes, yes. But it's nice. It's nice that through the miracle of technology we can hang out. So it's nice to see.
It is. It is. It is. So, we're really fortunate to have an amazing friend of mine, a recent friend that I met in Madison, Wisconsin, who is joining us on the conversation, and that is the Reverend Dina Nina Martinez-Rutherford. Say that fast 3 times. And Dina is joining us to talk about all the wonderful things that she has going on in her life, a little bit about her backstory, of course, and Light of Love Fellowship that she has going on in Madison, as well as being an alder of the City Council Board for Madison, Wisconsin. Is that correct, Dina?
That is correct.
And that is so cool.
I will say I'm not reverend. I'm very irreverent.
But the irreverent Dina Nina Martinez.
Irreverent.
That's an awesome title.
Well, it is so good to have you on here, Dina Nina. So, or as your friends call you, Dina, I think, right? We're allowed to call
Dina
you
or Dina Nina. Either one is. I love them both.
You know, while I was reading about you, Dina Nina, for some reason my mind said your name to the tune of the ABBA song Mamma Mia, and I've been walking around the house all day going Dina Nina. And it fits. It totally fits.
That's the first time I've gotten that, and I endorse that message 1,000%.
Good. I'm glad that
Dina Nina.
I could have gone a couple of different ways, so I'm glad that
Yes.
you're a fan. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So before we dig in, I think we should warn our listeners that this could be a very fun and raucous conversation. So you better have your safety belt, seatbelts strapped on, because you might be thrown out of your seat with laughter or all kinds of silliness. Because just you wait until we get Dina Nina really talking about things. She has some pretty funny stories along the way too. So with that, I guess maybe we should start digging in here and start chatting. So Dina, it really is awesome to have you on. And as I said, just a moment ago, it's really been a treat to become friends with you. We were paired up because of your best friend, right? Who happens to be somebody that I know that's in my world, totally disconnected. But because I was going to be in Madison seeing my best friend, connections happen. Next thing you know, you and I are hanging out at a gay leather bar. The Friday night, it wasn't a leather bar. It was just whatever it is that is in Madison. What is it called? Patrick's or something?
Shamrock.
I knew something Irish. So we're hanging out there and we had a really good time. Then we hung out all day that following day on Saturday too.
And that was the leather bar.
That was the leather bar, which was one of the most fun afternoon that involved three women as well, 3 straight women, all married, right? Who were out.
One was a lesbian.
One was lesbian, that's right. And so let's just say it was a very fun afternoon. So, my God. Yeah, it'll go down in history. So with that said, we talked a lot about your faith and who you are. So let's kind of dig into that. First of all, let's start with, where are you from? And talk about that. So, just what it was like growing up.
I love that your drawl came out then. Where are you from?
Where are you from?
Well, originally I'm from Texas. I haven't lived in Texas for 20 something years, 25 years. Before Madison, I spent the bulk of my time in California and Los Angeles, and then I've been here longer than any place other than Texas. So kind of has magically and unexpectedly come home for the moment. And I grew up in a small town. We had 1,735 people for the vast majority of my youth in that town. And so everybody knew everybody. It was that typical like small town. You go out and smoke a cigarette, somebody's going to see you and tell your parents kind of thing.
Hate when that happens.
And I grew up Southern Baptist, and then I just kind of put this together. But do you know the Shiny Happy People video or documentary or what is that the name of it? The IBLP Institute on Basic Life Principles. Bill Gothard. It's like who are the people that have like a million children that had a reality show? That's the
Oh, like
Duggars.
the Duggars. Is that
Yeah.
yeah, they're like the quiverful movement
Yes.
or whatever of going to populate
Yeah.
the earth so that we can grow the church.
Yeah. So a lot of those really hardcore, you wear your best when you go out into the world to represent God in the best way. The father is the head of the household. What he says goes, and above him is Bill Gothard, the church. So there was a lot of that really strict, staunch fundamentalism. And then we kind of found a more charismatic, Pentecostal kind of influences in my youth upbringing. And then in my 20s, I didn't really, quote unquote, rebel. I had about a year where I was like, I'm going to go to church. And then all of a sudden, I was in what's called a third wave church, which is what you see now when you hear evangelicalism. It's kind of that, like, we raise our hands. Yeah, we may speak in tongues, but we do that privately. But it's a more contemporary, casual version of church, less liturgical and more emotional. So
is this more the type of church that you would see an actual like rock band on the stage with drums, and maybe there's some cool theatrical lighting and smoke machines and songs about how Jesus is my boyfriend?
Yeah, totally.
Oh, so Jesus was your boyfriend?
He and I were
Jesus was my boyfriend.
Yeah, wait a minute. I thought,
Yeah.
Kelly. Well, Dina, did you know that he was two-timing you with Kelly?
We had an open relationship. I understand.
Oh, is that how that went? Okay, gotcha. Okay.
For him, for me, it was like just Jesus.
Just Jesus. You live for Jesus only, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Okay,
then once we move into this later, we can talk about reincarnation and past life experiences, which will kind of tie into a lot of it.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I love us digging into that.
I had a past life memory while I was an evangelical Christian. It was bizarre.
Is that possible? Because evangelicals they're not gonna get into that, I assume.
No.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know how to reconcile this.
Did you keep it to yourself?
Oh, yeah. For years.
Oh, wow.
Now I talk about it all the time.
Yeah. Hopefully not out of shame you kept it to yourself.
And, I don't know if it was shame. It was like, I just don't know how to process a past life memory within a faith journey that doesn't include that as part of its canon or
Exactly, where there's no context to apply. This is kind of floating out there, just being its own without any kind of attachment or connection.
And it was like, I knew it was a past life memory. I just didn't. I was like, did I make this up? What is this? And now I kind of see how it fits a lot more.
You have been on an amazing journey. So, was there
a journey?
Have you ever in this crazy journey of yours, did you ever doubt your faith? Was there a time you're like, yeah, this is not working for me in any way, or you just left, any kind of belief system and just like, yep, I'm I'm an atheist or any of that?
I don't think I've ever been legitimately atheist. I had a hard time reconciling my sexual orientation before I realized it was a gender orientation. I had a hard time reconciling that with my fundamentalist Christianity. And, as people who, uh, leave the faith as apostates, I guess, like it's hard to explain that. And some people can reconcile it easily. I just didn't have the ability to grasp that. And the church will tell you that you just wanted to sin, or you were never really a Christian, or whatever. But my relationship with Jesus was highly committed and highly personal and incredibly deep. So when you have a crisis of faith and your entire support group leaves you, that's messed up. That's not true faith and not true community. So I called myself agnostic as a bridge for me to find whatever my spiritual path would be.
Wow.
Because I was like, I don't know what I believe right now. Like I'm pissed off, I'm hurt, when your relationship with somebody changes, it takes time to kind of process that and go through the pain and the absence. And so I spent a lot of time working through that pain and absence. It's like when you're in a physical relationship, somebody leaves you, you have to go through that process of like healing and growing and understanding who you are without that human being in your life, right?
Wow.
So with Jesus and God, it was the same thing for me. Like I had to process that breakup.
Did you
Go ahead, Kelly.
find a new community at the time?
No, I drank.
I totally understand that one. That can feel like a community of one.
Yeah.
Me and my friend Jack. Yeah.
Yeah. Jack and Ronrico and
Right.
Anything else that you might be offered or find available?
Yep. That.
So this breakup that you had, did you onboard it yourself, or did you realize that it was because of the community and because all of a sudden you didn't fit these standards? So you saw it for what it is, or did you take on the shame of that?
So, so I left a faith body in the mid-90s and came out as gay for a year. And then Jesus intruded into my life again. And I was like, okay, Jesus, I'll come back. I miss you too, and then went back into the church wholeheartedly, really passionately, and was training to be a church planter. And so my pastors and I would meet regularly, and we would talk about they would give me assignments. I would finish those. They said, start a small group, be a small group pastor, and then multiply that group, and we'll send, And it was just like every time I got to the next stage, there was another thing and another thing. Like the final piece was I dyed my hair maroon. It had been bleach blonde since I met them. So like, the 90s short guy haircut, blonde, and you're like, I'm a rock star, but I'm Jesus rock star, and then I dyed it this maroon, and my senior pastor and I met for prayer and Bible study, and he said, we really feel like you dyeing your hair is part of your old lifestyle. And I was like, do you not think that I didn't pray so hard until I felt like I heard an answer from Jesus before I dyed my hair? Like, I asked Jesus what I'm supposed to wear in the morning, like that is how we're taught. And I prayed hard for every decision I made. And so in that moment, I was like, oh, I'm never going to be good enough. Like, they're never going to trust me, even though my faith is pure. My commitment to the gospel and Christianity was 100%. And it just shook me in a way that I couldn't recover from.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a changing goalpost that I could never reach. And nothing worked. And so I was just like, done, I'm done. F this. I'm gonna call myself agnostic. I don't know how to deal with this like pain. I don't know how to deal with this breakup. So I'm gonna be gay, you know? And so I've always been drawn to, and we'll talk, I'm sure we'll talk about how I define my faith now, but like, I've always been drawn to paganism and Hinduism. And it was always like forbidden. And then like going through my journey into paganism and finding out about Wicca and finding out about Hinduism, I was like, there's no hell in paganism. There's no, like, everything that they said, like everybody kept saying, witches and pagans, they dance naked under the stars
They do?
around the devil, and then they have orgies with the devil. And I'm like, oh wow, like, y'all are just making up stuff to scare people. So things started shifting, and I started to create this quilt of spirituality.
Mm.
Until I got to where I am today, which is like this beautiful piece of art that keeps me safe, keeps me warm, protects me, loves me.
Were there teachers or books or experiences along the way that helped shape, made up the building blocks of the new belief
Yes,
system that you came into?
yes, and like, there was a wonderful friend of mine, Brenny, who I met when I was working at Cheesecake Factory in Texas, who was a feng shui practitioner, and we did some meditation, and she gave me some insights. So she was like kind of a guru to me. But really it's been me and the divine most of the way, and my experiential understanding and I think a lot of innate understanding of spirituality that was brought through from, I mean, obviously I believe in reincarnation, so I believe that that I have innate understanding of some things that are spiritual that I couldn't explain before, if that makes sense, that I brought from other paths and incarnations and journeys.
I'm really curious to hear what some of your past lives were like.
Well, so I'll be happy to talk about it because I love talking about this. I just had a conversation about this today, and one of my friends who is a therapist and mental health care, and I were talking about it, and she was like, "Whoa, you got to give me some." I plunge into things like, She was like, "I needed context." So there are many past lives that I know about and have had memories from. I've had 2 spontaneous past life memories. The one when I was still following Jesus, still in a relationship with Jesus. I'm still in a relationship with Jesus. It's just a lot different than it was. But I I I had this moment where I was in this carriage, and I think it was like the late 1800s, early 1900s, and it was in England, and I knew that I was part of the aristocracy, and we were in a carriage, and I was being taken away to a place, one of our houses in the country, so that I would be brought far away from a man that I was in love with and that loved me and had all of my financial security threatened by my father if I got in a relationship with him.
Mm.
And it was so profound because, like, he's opened the carriage door and my driver was yelling at him, and he goes, "If you tell me that you don't love me, I will leave you alone forever." And I told him that I didn't love him, and saw the pain in his soul. And then the moment he shut the door and left, I crumbled. I was like, I was so in love with him. And I had another experience that was similar in the sense that my financial stability was threatened in France. And so I went to Versailles in 2000, and we were in the looking at the gardens in the back on the huge terrace, and then I had this, I just shifted into this understanding of what had happened in the past in that space. And I took a lover, like, he was amazing and very much below my station. And I walked into this party and everybody was talking about me and, gossiping about me and looking at me with such disdain. And I remember feeling rejected and pain. And then I was like, F these people. Like, Marie can go fuck herself, pardon my language. And I walked through and held my dignity, and then left and knew that my entire world had changed. So, and then for years, I had a healer once tell me that I was a disciple of Christ, and I was like, that's totally makes sense. Like, I was a female disciple of Christ, and that was before I even considered my gender being, something different. And then I was working with a friend of mine who was also a really incredible healer. Her name is Renee Hayden. She's in the Madison area. And we went through a shamanic journey she took me through this journey. And she goes, "Where were you?" And I was like, "I'm in this courtyard." And it's like so long ago. And I was getting water and I was like, "Oh, I'm Mary Magdalene." And I was like, "What?" And then all of a sudden I'm getting water, and I know that's a story that could be held inside me. And so whether all of these are real or not, they enlighten my journey into who I am. So that's kind of how I look at it. But I remember Jesus coming into this area, and I was like, they were laughing. He and the people around him were just laughing, and I saw so much joy. Something that we don't see in the Western Christ, like, I saw so much joy and laughter, and our eyes met, and he saw into me. And I was like, what the fuck just happened? Are you going to have to bleep me out? I'm sorry.
Nope.
I didn't ask if I could curse or not.
Oh, we'll just put a little E on it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Explicit.
Yes.
And then my next memory was us being intimate. Like, he loved me deeply, and we loved each other deeply. And
You're talking about Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a power that he also had, but he opened up so much in me. So we were about to be intimate, and it wasn't carnal, but it was like we crawled into each other's souls
Mm.
and stood up on the precipice of the universe. Like it was profound. And so in that moment, when I remembered that, I realized why my relationship and understanding of who Jesus was is so different than what the church has depicted it as.
Indeed. Oh,
Sorry, you asked for that. I gave you a lot.
you gave an amazing amount, and especially this last part where you were intimate with Christ, Jesus, the man. And so for some, they would absolutely flip out on that. It's like, oh my God, because we build this, put him up on an altar of purity, and little do we don't know what he did for a good period of his life, right? The majority of his life was, just there's no record of that, so we have no bearing. We only know him as a youth, and then the last 3 years of his ministry. So the point being is that we have no idea what he actually was like, or what kind of relationships he had. But I like to think that we can look at Jesus, the person, and see that for a really kind of a romantic side of things. And the reason why I say that is not just because of what you shared, but somebody I was very dear to who's now gone, incredibly wise person, who he saw Jesus the exact same way. He saw him in that type of loving relationship, and could talk about the physicality of that. I was like, wow, it really opened my eyes to that. And so you sharing that's really important, because for whatever reason, our institutions would tell us that we're supposed to, be very pure about that, how we see what would be the Son of God.
He was a mystic.
Yes.
He was transcendent, and there was so much laughter. Like, we laughed so much together. We
Mhm.
shared so much joy. And I hold on to that when I think about Jesus, like, more than any other thing I've ever been told. There was so much joy and laughter and transcendence within how I know Jesus in this incarnation, and how I traditionally in all of my incarnations have related to him.
Well, and I've always thought that Jesus was pretty funny. I mean, the parables were wild. Like, we've domesticated all the parables, so it's like, oh yeah, he's a good sheep. It's like he's like, no, that like he had 99 sheep that were safe, but this guy went all the way out, left everybody by himself, went out to find this one lost sheep, because that's how much in love he was with him. And then people, like all the shepherds there, would be like, no, no, you stay
You
with the ones
don't
that are
do
safe.
that.
But he was saying wild things all the time, like
Yeah.
the mustard seed grows into the greatest of trees. No, it doesn't. It grows into a tiny little bush. He's turning stuff on its head to get an effect. And I have to think that sometimes it was funny.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
you
for
would,
sure.
you would think so, that he had humor, and also the physicality. So there's an importance, a part of that. You were talking about, your personal experience, Dina. Anybody that wants to consider it, he was, or just read the scriptures. He was touching people and they were touching him, which was a huge deal in of itself, because, these were unclean folks, right? In the hierarchical of, of the culture at that time, who dare he, how dare he touch anybody that wasn't like him, or vice versa. And
Yeah.
so again, that physicality, he was always breaking the rules of this. Like, no, it's okay to be touched and touch, something that is, not kosher or
Yeah.
accepted within that current culture. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and
Wow.
the church has always been so ambivalent also about Christ's intimacy. I mean, there are mystics throughout entire Christian history who have had, who talked about having intimate experiences with Christ. And then there's a lot of, just the imagery. You're sitting in a church and he's hanging up there and he's got just nothing but a scrap of clothes on, and you're looking up and you're talking about letting him into your heart. And that's all very, the language itself is very intimate. And there's always been that ambivalence around the,
Yeah. Because
erotic element.
it scares them. It's scary to think of someone who is deified as also being human and having the same needs and desires. But when we come into the understanding of what the divine is and how it plays out in this realm, the divine is us and has the same needs and desires that we need because we are part of that, Don't be afraid of it. I have a lot of trauma around sex, and that's a whole nother podcast, but we have done a disservice to people by making them shame themselves and have limited our experience of Jesus and limited our experience of the divine because you have placed shame upon human experience and divine interaction. So
Well said.
Yeah, I believe a lot of modern, at least like modern Protestant theology is filtered through Paul, who had a touch of that Greek philosophy. So it's like bodies are bad, bodies are dirty and
Yeah.
filthy and rotten, and spirits are good, and they get elevated. So you get a lot of this kind of body shaming, but Jesus came in a body. Like he made a choice to be embodied in a body, and in an era that didn't have showers. Like he was really like, in the dirt.
Mm-hmm.
Literally.
So, Dina, I love how you describe yourself as a human. I get this from an interview that you did that I caught where you were, was talking about the fact that you've just been recently elected as the first trans person on the city council of the city of Madison, right, in Dane County. And you corrected the interviewer in that saying, well, that you are not corrected, but you pointed out that you're a human first and who is trans. And I liked how you framed that. So can you dig into that a little bit with us?
Yeah. So I think modern religion considers how I relate to my body as inherently against the divine. Like, God created you, you should love who you are. Yes, yes. And there are millions of other possibilities outside of that, right? When I started to transition, I was in Los Angeles, and I was standing on the corner of Fairfax and 3rd, right outside of the farmer's market, if you know that area. I'd just gotten off work, so I was wearing all white, so very not cute. But I'm standing on there, and for the first time in a very long time, I actually talked to God, and I was like, I'm terrified. I'm terrified about going to get my first shot. I'm terrified about transitioning. We're told that we're freaks of nature. We're weird, that we're deviant, that we're wrong. And so, sorry about that. But that every part of being queer or trans is sinful, wrong, not in alignment with what nature wants, which, as we look at nature, come on, diversity. And I prayed, and I was like, I'm terrified, I'm scared, I don't know. Like, I've been told my entire life from pastors and teachers that I'm wishy-washy, and I changed my mind, I don't know how to commit to anything. And the still small voice that I hadn't heard in a long time, that voice that passes all understanding, the reality of what the way the divine speaks, intervened in my life there and said, if you don't do this, you're going to be miserable for the rest of your life. And if you don't do this, someone will not see your example. And the implication was that people will not kill themselves because they've seen my example or seen my experience. And I was like, cool, let's do it.
And that was it, huh?
Yeah. And
That was all part of that, was the fact that you could see through, like, if you do this, you now set examples for others to follow as well.
Yeah.
That's very
And a
powerful.
lot of people say, God, that sounds like such a responsibility. And I was like, it doesn't feel like a responsibility. It's an honor, you know?
Wow.
And so when I think about my journey and the joy and untetheredness of being that I've experienced since then, I've never experienced anything more right, more correct, more holy, more divine, because I am like, God created me to go through this journey. And this journey is part of my divine journey. And has been such a blessing. Hard. You know, Paul talked about having the thorn, you know, like talked about having this piece of him that it was so painful and hard. It's kind of like that, but it doesn't hold me away from God. It doesn't hold me away from people. I'm able to relate to human beings and to the divine in a way that I would have never been able to before. I have so much more compassion and understanding for the way that the things that people have to experience and endure, that I would have never had my journey been a cis gay journey. Like, it still would have been beautiful, but for me, this journey is me. It's how I exist, and I'm grateful. I'm glad I'm trans. That sounds weird, but yeah, I'm glad.
It seems like it would be more challenging to have an authentic relationship with the divine if your relationship is predicated on the fact that I have to pretend to be something I'm not in order to be let into this relationship. Like, that already sounds like a setup.
Which was my entire journey before, and which is the journey of so many people.
Yeah.
Today.
Yeah, they're not living as their authentic selves.
Yeah.
How can, and to Kelly's point, how can you be fully connected with divine, or at least be aware, because we're always divine. It's always within us, right? It's there. But we can't connect to it because we're living an inauthentic or somewhat diminished life in whatever way. And so therefore it builds a wall between that connection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. How can you connect to something that demands all of you when you're not being all of you?
When you're not being all of you. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's beautiful.
You know, I recently read about a term, gender euphoria, that so frequently people talk about gender dysphoria. And it's, you know, and it's a legitimate concern. But I read an article by someone who said, you know, we don't talk enough about gender euphoria, about the, you know, the positive effects of affirming who I am.
Yes.
That's wonderful, right?
While I was transitioning, I kind of cocooned and cloistered myself away from my family in Texas, and was so fearful of how I would be received. And some of those fears were founded and some of those fears were actualized. But like, my aunt, very Christian, conservative, voted for the Orange Man, told me, and yes, I've gone through depression, you know, since then. And how does anyone in the world not go through depression and struggle with mental health in the 2020s, you know? But I went home and my aunt goes, look, I don't understand it, and I don't necessarily agree with it, but she goes, I've never seen you happier.
Wow.
And I don't think it's necessarily happiness. I think it's centered and being in alignment with my beingness, with my divine purpose. So if someone who is staunch conservative Christian from Texas can see beyond to see me, then I have hope that more people can.
That's powerful. And so, Dina, as we're coming to time here, unfortunately, we
Oh
could go on
God,
for
is
a
it
long
already
time.
over almost?
Well, most I know. I we'll have to have you come back on and keep talking on another episode. But I think we'd be neglecting our listeners if we didn't talk a little bit about what you're doing, in addition to being an awesome alder there in the city of Madison. But you also are engaged with the Light of Love Fellowship. You want to share with us a little bit about that?
Yeah, about 20 years of visioning and trying. I started trying to create a community around faith that can heal a lot of the damage that the traditional church or religious paths have done to people that are queer, and even those who aren't queer, those who are just trying to experience life, And so kind of and we've talked about this a lot, but I often describe myself as pagan costal, and I think
I love that.
Pentecostal pagan. So when I think about my quilt, as we say, I feel like my journey is like a river. Like the river is always held by the earth securely. And at some places it's placid, some places it trickles and babbles, and other places it roars and wails and tosses to and fro.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of those experiences that I have that have brought me to an understanding of who the divine is, what the divine is, and how we ourselves are part of that divinity, have led me to creating a community that, like the earth, hopefully will hold people through their journey safely, securely, sometimes tumultuously, sometimes peacefully and calmly, and that will heal the wounds that have been inflicted by people who oftentimes I think are well-meaning in the beginning. But yeah, embrace all that we are while creating a community that will facilitate connection and growth and love and provide support for all of us through this journey. So it's kind of universal Unitarian, New Thought, Christian pagan, it's a little bit of my journey, and just being in a space where we can love one another and care for one another.
I love that.
That hopefully won't leave when things get hard or when you have a crisis of faith.
You're with him all the way. Are you doing this online and in person?
Both.
Okay.
So at the moment we're growing. So we're doing the first, second, and third Sundays as a virtual circle, small group. And then one community gathering with in person at a bar.
Love it.
In Madison. So the vision is that, based on a cell church model, I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but where community growth all happens within, you're like, hurry up, Dina, wrap it up. Happens within
Keep it coming.
Happens within small communities. So like you've got 5 to 10 people, maybe 15 at the biggest. And then once they grow beyond that, they multiply into 2 groups, which creates a pod, 2 circles, which creates a pod. So when, let's say I'm in a circle and I come into the circle and I'm like, oh my God, I can't afford this phone bill. the circle chips in, the circle helps. If the circle can't do it, they don't have the resources for it, then you have the pod. And when the pod can't do it, greater community will bear that burden together to help people through. It's community, like the way community used to be. One of my friends today explained it like raising a barn, like the Amish raise barns.
I'm so proud.
Like, I can push the freaking side of the barn up as much as I want, but I'm not going to get it fully in the place that it needs to be. But when I have 10 to 20 people, we can get that wall up like that, right?
Wow.
But we've neglected and avoided community and created pain points within those spaces for so long that it's hard to be in that space. So let's sit together, the discomfort, through the pain, and love each other and heal those spaces while meeting the needs of each other in a compassionate, loving way, which is where spiritual growth happens, So lightoflovefellowship.com.
So that's where people can go and find community, connect with you, connect with other people, bring their authentic selves.
Yes.
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 Thank you for that. Thank you for organizing that.
Thank you for letting me share. And I'm just honored to be a part of it. Like, I'm honored. I'm just honored. Like, it's the divine's orchestration, whatever that looks like. I said in my email this week that I don't know if it's like a personal deity with a personality that hovers over all of us and says, this is how it's going to be, or if it's an algorithmic code in the universal structure that meets us where we are. But whatever it is, I'm grateful.
Thank you, Dina Nina.
You're welcome.
Dina.
Thank you.
I feel like we've just started to touch the surface. I think we do need to have you come back so that we can get more of your story and more of the work that you're doing. I feel like we've just gotten an introduction, but what a beautiful introduction. So I'm so glad to meet you, and so glad that call you one of my friends.
Me too. Me too.
So we'll have to have you back.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Radical Love Live, hosted by Mark Dilcom and Kelly Wilson. Recorded at the Bravery Studios in Garfield, New Jersey. All rights reserved. Find our episodes on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. And check us out at radicallovelive.com, along with our personal websites at markdilcom.com and kellywilson.com. This is Radical Love Live, where we explore faith outside the boxes.